It's all, I'm not apologizing for this. This is about making money for our investors. Companies are valued at crazy large numbers. So even though everything looks good, terrific team, good technology, unmet need, from a venture investor point of view, I don't care how good it is. I have to ensure that we're going in at a value that we can get out on average in 5 years and make a substantial return to our investors.
Welcome to Leading Beyond the Lab. Today we're joined by Mara Aspinall. Mara is a partner at Illumina Ventures and brings with her a wealth of experience covering all things genomics, genetics, diagnostics, and now investor. I'd love to hear in your own words, Mara, a bit more about your journey and your story.
In May of 2025 with KJ Muldoon.
KJ Muldoon was diagnosed with what doctors call a CPS1 deficiency.
A number of different companies and academics were able to get together and create a CRISPR-based editing that was able to edit the gene that did not allow him to metabolize ammonia. And lo and behold, from 7 months from diagnosis to treatment. And is he cured? It looks like it. Phenomenal. We're only starting to do it here in Genomics 3.0.
What advice would you have for those when it comes to building that compelling pitch?
On average, I bet a third of pitches, the companies didn't even look at the venture website.
Really?
There are some key issues, and I'll highlight 3 of them.
Welcome to Leading Beyond the Lab. Today we're joined by Mara Aspinall. Thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful to be here.
Mara is a partner at Illumina Ventures and brings with her a wealth of experience covering all things genomics, genetics, and diagnostics, with a lengthy background in academia, plus worked as an operative and now investor. I'd love to hear in your own words, Mara, a bit more about your journey and your story.
Great to be here. And I think about my journey as really 3 different parts. For the last 8 years, I've been in venture and really had the opportunity to work with some of the most exciting young companies. Some of them succeed, some of them don't succeed, but it gives me a real view of what's happening in the marketplace. At Illumina Ventures, we are an independent venture firm. We were spun out of Illumina Inc. about 10 years ago, but we remain focused on genomics in therapeutics, in diagnostics for sure, and in life science tools. Before that, I had my own venture capital firm, but at a much smaller scale. Previously, I had the privilege of working with some great teams and operating some large and small companies, CEO of Ventana Medical, Roche Tissue Diagnostics, Genzyme Genetics. And then in between, I had the chance to work in academia, in particular, Arizona State University, where I'm the co-founder of the Diagnostics Master's Degree program. It's the only program in the world focused exclusively on the intellectual pursuit of diagnostics as a discipline. So we can talk about that later if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to. So what was the inflection point where you made the change into venture?
Well, after running some big companies and small companies and having my base in the Southwest, it was an ideal time to move to using my experience from operations in picking the companies of the future. The privilege of working with great teams is what it's all about, and I'm sure we'll talk about the importance of the right founders and the right fit. But in venture, you get the chance to look at all of the newest trends and really pick the most exciting ones going forward and work with those entrepreneurs to nurture them and their ideas to make something in clinical reality.
Yeah, and what are the current things that you see as being the hot trends or things to watch?
Well, we could think about it in 2 different ways. First, I'll start with technology. I think from a diagnostics point of view, there are some key issues, and I'll highlight 3 of them. Number 1, which is closest to commercial and really broadly commercialized, is liquid biopsy. And for your listeners who don't know this, probably everybody does, instead of looking at tissue for a cancer diagnosis and doing a tissue biopsy, you look at the blood. And virtually every cancer sheds something into the blood. And with better and better diagnostic technologies, we can find in a very highly sensitive way early cancers, mid-stage, and unfortunately sometimes very late-stage cancers, and just do that in a blood draw. So that's number one.
That basically makes every cancer, if you're getting all cancers at stage 1, it makes them all curable, right? In theory.
In theory.
Yeah.
First of all, we can't do this for every cancer, and we really realistically, the amount of time and money it takes, we can't test everyone for every cancer every year. But we are beginning to move much further towards that. So there are some tests called MCEDs, multi-cancer early detection, and those tests are beginning the new revolution to do that. Unfortunately, and I've written about this in my newsletter, Sensitive and Specific, these tests are a great beginning, but they're not highly sensitive and not highly specific, so they often miss some of the early cancers. Is it still powerful? I believe it is, but I believe that technology will get better. But maybe not multi-cancers. Maybe instead of each of us taking something that is for every single cancer, you will know the cancers that you and your family history would say you're more susceptible to, and I will take the ones that are most relevant to my history.
Yeah, and what was number 2?
Number 2 is the advent of different kinds of samples, alternative sampling. And this focuses, and I'll talk about number 3, as home testing. But the idea that we don't have to use just tissue or blood. We can now use urine. We can now use saliva. We can now use tears to look at, it's early work, but it's very interesting work. We could look at gait for patients who potentially have Parkinson's disease and measure their gait with a sensor in the shoe. We could listen to voice. We can listen to language to say, are they going into an early dementia? So there are a lot of different sample types. My favorite brand new one that's just last year won an award from NIH is nail beds. If you push your nail bed, you can see whether it's red or white. And for pregnant women, it's very important to know whether they're iron rich or iron poor. And with an iPhone or any kind of smartphone, you can take a picture of the nail beds and proceed to say this patient is anemic or not.
Wow.
So all sorts of alternative samples that are just beginning, but I believe this is going to make diagnosis and monitoring much easier going forward.
What do you think is the timescale with that?
Well, frankly, it's already happening.
Yeah.
But I believe it will make a tremendous difference in 10 years, but we'll see some real changes within the next 5 years.
And is AI accelerating that progress, or is that just later on in the life cycle?
Absolutely. AI has made a key difference. And when we talk about AI, which is ubiquitous, so I'm not even going to call it a separate trend. It's really the foundation for which everything seems to be.
The AI revolution.
That's exactly right. It's sort of like, do you remember the years in which everybody said they were a .com company, whether they were or not? The same is happening with AI. Every company, diagnostics for sure, tools, therapeutics, they all say they're integrating at least machine learning, if not AI. Is it true? Well, sometimes. But I do believe in these alternative samples and in diagnostics broadly, AI is playing a huge role. Number one, in the laboratory to improve workflow. But in these sorts of tests, it has the ability to read and keep in the AI memory so many nail beds, so many different gaits, so many different pieces of data that really changes the ability or improves the ability to identify one individual patient.
Interesting. And is there a third?
There is a third, and but also very much related, which is home testing.
Okay.
So home testing around the world, but particularly in developed countries, saw its moment during COVID. And it's interesting because when you go back to COVID, early on, people did not want to do their tests at home. Whether the tests were free or close to free, they wanted a healthcare professional to do the tests. Today, towards the end of the pandemic, people said, I don't want to wait online. I want my answer now. And for different reasons, people on all different political spectrums said, I don't want to share my data with the government. I don't want to have anything to do with the government. I don't want to have anything to do with the payer. I want my answer now. And the test got down to about $5 US. So it started to be available for virtually everybody. Not everybody. You have a family of 4, $20. You can't test everybody all the time. But I think the advent of home testing is coming for a few reasons. Number one, the technology's better. Number two, it's cheaper. And number three, and there's not a lot of discussion about this, more and more therapeutics are being given intramuscular. So yes, we know diabetes, and lots of people with diabetes have used insulin for a long time. But now we're talking about migraine and psoriasis and all sorts of GI diseases for which patients are comfortable giving themselves injections at home. And I think it only takes a half a step further to say, if I'm comfortable giving myself a drug at home, I'm going to be comfortable doing my test at home.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking of the wait times for GP doctors in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's as bad in America.
Well, as I read, it's probably not as bad in America. But I'll add one more reason that I believe finally at-home testing will happen.
Yeah.
It is the wait time. And it's the fact that there are fewer lab techs. The average age of lab techs is like 56 in the US. So there are not a lot of people going into the field, partly because of AI and automation. And it's difficult to see the physician. And the reality is, if you feel bad and it's Tuesday afternoon, it's not helpful to go see the doctor on Friday. You want an answer now. And it's what I call a movement of taking back control, to get the answer and start to act on it quickly.
Yeah, and I think reinforcing that is you've almost got the human demand from the frustration in seeing the GPs and people and the general practitioners, because that then drives the need for a solution somewhere, and then this could be that.
I think that's exactly right.
And how does that dovetail with things like digital health? So people's monitoring of their own healthcare and things like that.
Yeah, well, in the same way that AI is ubiquitous and sort of the foundation for many of these new tests, digital health is a key piece of it. One of our companies that is part of our portfolio at Illumina Ventures is a company called Let's Get Checked, actually based in Ireland, but very much global. And they're an example of, during the pandemic, they made testing available and easy to use in the home and in the workplace. And they've only expanded that. So you see the expansion where people can get the test, they can order the test, they can do the sampling at home, and then get their answer that much quicker. And when you use digital health, once you get a positive, let's say whether it's from flu or even HIV or other diseases, you can then see a professional online much quicker than otherwise. Does it eliminate in-person visits? It does not, but I hope it means in-person visits are only the most complex things, and that most people can manage a day-to-day, quote, ordinary diseases and conditions at home.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's all moving so fast, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as an investor, so Mara, you have garnered a lot of experience and have proven success stories of companies making it, if you like, in a highly competitive space. How much do you rely on your instinct, I suppose, in terms of pattern recognition, and versus data, when it comes to picking which are the good opportunities to invest?
It's a great question. And I don't want to wimp out on the answer, but I will tell you it's both.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like thinking about decisions with your heart and your head. I call that first venture pitch something that it's like falling in love. You kind of know right at the beginning that this is something I'm really intrigued with and I want to learn more. And so it has to be the combination. But I'm going to start with the heart, or the personal sense of these are people This is a team that needs to go forward. But the data comes in terms of the pattern recognition that says, why has everyone else failed in this space? Or why is nobody else in this space? And you need to get rational answers to those that make some sense. So I do believe it is the combination, but for me, where I do most of my investing in the diagnostics industry, I have seen, unfortunately, a lot of failure, pretty much every industry. But so I have to temper sometimes the falling in love with the reality of it hasn't worked the first 10 times. Why is the 11th time better?
You have to get the head and the heart aligned.
That is exactly right.
And you're right, there is something romantic about it, isn't it? As being the inflection between success for the companies and working with the founders on their stories. And what do you see as your role with the founders that you work with? What do you see your role being in addition to obviously the capital?
Yeah. Well, first I'm going to answer the half question is, what do I see my role with investors? Because people give us money to take care of and as part of the fund. And I do think, as much as we'll use the romantic analogy, you have to have a walkaway point. Mm-hmm. You can't fall too much in love before you make that ultimate decision. So you have to put your head into it and go through the numbers. So one of the things that happens at different times of the industry, not quite right now, but you still see it, is companies are valued at crazy large numbers. So even though everything looks good, terrific team, good technology, unmet need, from a venture investor point of view, I go in thinking about how I'm going to go out. So if on day one this company is overvalued, I don't care how good it is, I have to know that I can get out at a value. Because as much as, and I'll talk about what we do with companies themselves, it's all, I'm not apologizing for this. This is about making money for our investors. So we have to be able to be rational, logical, and a little unemotional to ensure that we're going in at a value that we can get out, let's say, on average in 5 years, and make a substantial return to our investors.
Yeah, it's almost like going in with super empathy with the founders, because you understand their challenge and needs. You work with them on the journey and the route map out of that. But then when you step away, it's almost like you're going to responsible mode and you think about, right, these are my responsibilities, these are the decisions that we have to make. I find it fascinating how it brings everything together, actually.
That's exactly. And that balance between the two.
And if you've got multiple opportunities to invest, the technology is similar technology, let's say, for example, and naturally then I suppose it comes down to founder investor fit. How do you qualify that?
Yeah, so, well, first, let me say, I try to look at as many companies in a similar space as possible. Because while you can't always compare directly, you can compare indirectly. And you get a sense of what area is hot and what is not. Now, it doesn't mean you want to go into sometimes you want to go into what isn't hot today, because back to those valuations are much more rational. But I think it's still important as an investor to go in with your eyes open and get a really good sense of, is the market frothy or not? But separate from that, what I look for in an entrepreneur and the team is, once again, three things.
I was going to say, what's an entrepreneur to you? Because that can vary as well.
Oh, that's true. Well, I'm going to say the CEO, who may or may not be the founder. I'm looking for somebody who is visionary, who thinks big and is excited about those opportunities. Secondly, though, I'm looking for someone who's practical. And you can argue that those two things are in contrast to each other and in conflict to each other, which in a small way they are. But I don't want to invest in somebody who is so visionary that there's no practical reality to, you need reimbursement. So visionary that says we're going to get everything done in the next 6 months. It needs to be somebody who understands the practical reality. And thirdly, is somebody who takes feedback.
It's a good leader if they can, I suppose.
Exactly. Although you could argue that's kind of the fourth thing, so I'll talk about the team. But somebody who will take feedback from their team, from investors and from customers, as opposed to just saying, our product is perfect, it's your problem. And I've seen a lot of investors, a lot of entrepreneurs like that. It does not work.
Yeah, they've got to be grounded as
Yes.
well as being a visionary.
Yes.
Because I suppose you get inspired by the visionary part,
Yeah.
but then the grounded part gives you the kind of insurance policy and realistic view that they're actually going to make it.
Exactly. And how much money they have to raise. That is a key piece of it, to manage the financial reality of the current market. And right now in the U.S. and outside the U.S., it's tough to raise money in any area, particularly in diagnostics. So if you've got a visionary or an impractical visionary, and they don't really know how much money they need because they haven't made sort of core assumptions of what it's going to take, it does not help you financially, and you end up running out of money sooner than you should, and then you're in a very tough situation.
And when you're giving advice to these typically early stage founders, I suppose, would they be early stage, or is it various?
We as Illumina Ventures, our main fund typically invest in stage A companies, but recently we started Illumina Ventures Labs, where we do more mentoring and more work with the companies and the teams, and we invest at the seed stage.
That's nice. It's almost giving back as well and building that community across those companies, I suppose.
It is a little bit, yeah, they're in very different fields.
Yeah.
So sometimes they have things to share across platforms. But as an operating team and at Illumina Ventures, all of us have operating experience, so we can bring that to the companies. It also lets us get in early and help shape the company and the teams. And if you don't mind, can I just add one thing on teams? What do I look for teams? Because I talked about the CEO, him or her. I look for teams that argue well.
It's like a business partnership. That's how I would explain that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And teams that are always agreeing with each other is a problem, because then they don't have the screen they need to have to ensure they get the best answer. So if they're always deferring to the CEO, that's a problem. Now, if they're bickering all the time, for whatever reason, that's a problem too. So I look for teams that enjoy each other but argue well.
Yeah.
Or productively.
Yeah, productively. So, and would that be in a board meeting fashion with you there, or are you saying, because how do you sense that? That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah,
because obviously they're going to be, if there's business partners or something in there.
Yeah, it's a good question, because again, from Illumina Ventures, when we come into the seed round, we go to board meetings. So we have a chance to really watch them work together, and they're with us for 18 months. So that is a great time to do that. But if you don't do that, or that's not the model, I look for it in Q&A sessions. I look for it, does one person always answer every question regardless of the topic? Yeah. And when I'll try to be provocative when I ask questions, and you can kind of get the sense, even on Zoom, of body language and otherwise, if people are rolling their eyes on their colleague's answer. So it's a bit of a gut, but if you spend enough time with a company, I think you get the sense of whether they work together well.
Yes, yeah. And with those companies looking to prepare or are looking to raise capital, what advice would you have for those when it comes to building that compelling pitch?
Yeah, we could spend hours just talking about this. One is, I would say, short and sweet, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Not too much science.
Not necessarily too much science, literally not too much time.
Yeah.
To tell your story in an efficient way. There is no, what your real competition is when you're pitching? Somebody checking their email. If they're checking their email, unless their kid's in the hospital, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You need to keep them engaged. And at the first meeting, I think about it, it's sometimes called the reverse triangle or a newspaper. You want to do the headline as to what's most important. Then you want to go down in terms of level of detail. And you don't go down to the very bottom of that triangle unless they ask. So you need to explain the unmet need and read your audience. If you're talking to a venture firm that is highly scientific, then explain the science. If you're talking to one that's all about commercial and they're worried about the commercial risk shift. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that don't do their homework on the investors they're talking to, and they've got the exact same pitch for everybody. Doesn't work, typically does not work well.
Yes, yeah, they have to prioritize. And I've always
And
felt...
customize.
Yeah, and I've always thought there's something to be said for a true subject matter expert is able to not just adjust to the audience, but convey a super complex thing in a really simple way.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I think it was Albert Einstein who said the key to communicating is making things as simple as possible and no more.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think about anything that resonates, or any time I've become really good at something, it means I've gone through this kind of trial and error process, and then I'm able to just talk about it for hours, but I can get the same point across in such a short way.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
And what about on the genetics and genomics side of things, and how that feeds into all of this?
Yeah, and when I talked about trends, I really talked about macro trends from the average person's perspective. But if we go more to the technology, so let's focus on that. We're in the midst of a convergence of three really important factors, one of which is AI, which we've talked about. But the second one is what we call Genomics 3.0. And what do I mean by that? When you think about the Human Genome Project, that was Genomics 1.0. And it was only in the 1986, it wasn't that long ago, where it was all about decoding the human genome and the very, very basics of that. You go to the year 2000 and you get to Genomics 2.0. And what is that? That's understanding the genome, using it in the best way possible, which at the time was really about rare diseases and single point mutations. Now we're in Genomics 3.0. And that is not just academic understanding, but the fundamental use of genomics. And when I call genomics, I mean proteomics, epigenomics, spatial omics, broadly, and using that to truly change disease. And no better example than just in May of 2025 with KJ Muldoon, the little baby with a mutation. And a number of different companies and academics were able to get together and create a CRISPR-based editing that was able to edit the gene that did not allow him to metabolize ammonia. And lo and behold, from 7 months from diagnosis to treatment. And is he cured? It looks like it, a little early to tell, but phenomenal that we couldn't have even imagined this during Genomics 2.0. Well, maybe we imagined it in Genomics 2.0, but we're only starting to do it here in Genomics 3.0.
Yeah, the CRISPR technology is crazy how effective it can be.
Yeah.
What about is there potential safety concerns with that? Because I spoke to a CMO recently and they said that the difference maker for a CRISPR technology is the potential safety hazards through a 10-year period or cycle or something like that?
I think it's a very good question. And I think with any new technology, we have to look at safety, which is why it's appropriate to go slowly, but not stop as we understand the safety, what the FDA calls in a lot of drugs, phase 4. Mm-hmm. It's approved and it's out there. So yes, we actually have a company at Illumina Ventures called Broken String Technologies, actually out of the UK, and where the focus is off-target effects and to be able to identify off-target effects of gene therapy or CRISPR changes. So we're in the early stages, but this is something that I believe there will be an industry around understanding the safety issues, but it should not stop us going forward. And we need to, as an industry, fund every aspect of that and have clear and transparent and data-oriented research and publication about the good, bad, and hopefully not, but maybe the ugly.
And from a lessons learned perspective, have you ever been surprised by a venture or an investment and you've learned something from that you've carried with you that you weren't expecting?
Oh my goodness. I would say every single failure I have learned something from. And I'll start with the fact, and I've talked a lot publicly about this, is that you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. I had my own startup in circulating tumor cells, and we had great venture investors. It looked terrific. We were on every list of company to watch, but our technology was not ready for prime time, and we were not able to scale it. And the company ultimately failed. And what I learned then is we attempted to do too much in a short period of time, and we needed to tackle each challenge one by one. I think that's one lesson that a number of different companies, and I'll mention my failure, I won't mention anyone else's by name, but that is one thing that, as exciting as startup companies are, and many entrepreneurs and teams want to tackle multiple things, it's got to be a reasonable number for which they have a high level of success. So that for me would be one lesson learned.
So just on that, are you saying that, so even with the proven leadership team in place, there's still a limit on how many problems you could tackle at once?
Absolutely.
Just because it takes everyone's attention and collaboration to...
It should take everybody's attention.
Yeah.
Now, is the magic number 1? Maybe not. It may be 2 or 3, but it's not 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And each company needs to understand their strengths and their weaknesses. Do you remember the old SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? It's kind of an old-fashioned term now. But I think what's most important is for a leadership team, after they get funded, they can do this in private. They don't have to do it in front of their board, but ultimately they should, is really take stock at what they do well and focus on that. And ultimately they can build other opportunities through new strengths. But don't kid yourself that you can do everything. It's what I call, and I ask every entrepreneur I meet with, what's your superpower? What do you do, or what does the company do uniquely well? And don't forget that, because the nice shiny object in the corner is a hot area, so we should go do that. Make sure you do at least 1 or 2 things right, and then get to the rest.
How do you avoid, so from my experience, so ARTO's core business in talent solutions, when we are following the trends and looking to place people into these companies, we often find that there is almost like a London bus syndrome. Have you heard that saying before?
No.
I suppose, so in London, this is very common. You'll wait for a bus for 15 minutes, none come, and then one comes, but so does 4 others. Yeah, so you get 5 at once. So, and sometimes I feel like the trends are, they wait until a certain lead investor goes in and then everyone jumps on the bandwagon. How does an investor prevent themselves being one of those, and just following the market trends, and also evaluating like the Warren Buffett mentality of finding companies that are undervalued with enough market need?
Yeah. Well, sometimes we call that FOMO, the fear of missing out. So sometimes entrepreneurs love it, right? They have no term sheets and then they get 3.
Yeah.
But I think that you need to be grounded. You remember I just talked about the superpower.
Yeah.
I think venture firms need to do the same. They need to acknowledge what they do well as a team and what they don't do well. So there are some venture firms that are very good on the science, and they need to be picking up companies that they know the science will work, or avoiding companies that everybody else thinks is the nice shiny object and they know it won't work. There are other firms that are not as strong on the science, and they need to get companies that are a little later stage where they can help on the commercialization. So I think about it the same way. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses in order to go forward in the most effective way. And don't worry about, sometimes called lemmings. The lemmings are going this way. Now, there are some venture firms that are specifically set up, and I say venture, it could be PE as well, who are specifically set up to do countercultural, where they're looking to go against the wind. But the traditional ones want to capture, I call it capture the wave going up, not the wave going down.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if you were to offer advice to, say, an early stage founder who's listening right now, and they were wondering if there was any specific tips that you would offer which aren't in the ordinary realm, is there anything you would suggest that they do or prepare for or think about?
Well, we've mentioned a lot of them. Tell your story in a short and sweet way. But more fundamentally, understand what you do, what is your superpower, what you do especially well, and how you want to do it. Think about the time frame in which you want to do it. I ask a lot, and I mentioned the importance of monetization. Are you building this company for a 3 to 5 year flip? Or are you building this for a 10-year and you want to be the conglomerate in the industry? And why do I say that? Many people say, oh, I'm happy to do either of them. You build a company differently depending on how you want to exit. And it's important to know that going in. And some venture firms and PE firms are specifically there for a short period of time and then an acquisition. Others are much less sensitive to time and really want to build a larger company. Know which one you are going in.
Yeah, because I've been told by several investors that they don't like it when they feel like they're being mass approached. So a founder is basically, on speed dial trying to get, as many investors as they can. How could they go about filtering that list to qualify them or pre-qualify them effectively, like you're saying, so that they because I think that would then allow them to tailor their pitch, like you were also alluding to earlier?
Well, it takes time, but frankly, with ChatGPT, it takes less time now than it used to. Yeah. Know the portfolio companies that the company has. Understand what stage they typically invest. What is their average check size? Who are the partners at the firm who might be good, venture partners, partners at the venture firm who might be good partners to you and your firm. If you don't see anybody who has the expertise that could help you, maybe it's not the right firm. On average, I bet a third of pitches, the companies didn't even look at the venture website.
Really? That seems crazy to me.
Yeah. We're lucky at Illumina Ventures, since we're very much focused on genomics. We tend to have an immediate screen that people come in because they know they're genomics based and we have the expertise there. But on average, when I speak to my colleagues, people have not done their homework, and that is not helpful.
Not a good start.
And the other piece is venture capitalists talk to each other in the same way of the London bus issue. They talk to each other in a positive way, saying, oh, you're getting in, maybe we need to give it another look. Often they do the other piece is, don't bother meeting with this company. They're not prepared, they're not ready, and not a good use of your time.
First impressions count.
Yes.
Thanks, Mara. So what motivates you at this stage of your career then?
That's going to sound a little corny, but it's making a difference. One of the reasons you asked early on about moving from, running companies to venture. And as I thought about it, at big companies, and I've had the privilege of working with great teams and running large companies, but there are a lot of people who can do that. And it's great to have done it. But in working with young companies, you can really help them find their dream. And I get chills when I even say it, because you can see the light in their eyes when you help them say, wow, I can do it that way, or I can do it this way, or help me do this, and making an impact on entrepreneurs. But more fundamentally, what motivates me in diagnostics and really being in healthcare is making a difference for patients. There is no more stressful time in anyone's life than waiting for a diagnosis, waiting for a cancer diagnosis or a neurodegenerative disease diagnosis. That is the toughest time in one's life. So to be able to help people through that with a more accurate, with a faster answer, with an answer that hopefully their insurance company will pay for, and making that difference puts people at ease. Often it's bad news, but I have found in my personal life and my professional life that most people can handle bad news more easily than handling no news. And
that's so true. That's so true, yeah.
And diagnostics help do it. Yeah. Exactly.
I remember my wife had a tingling sensation in her tongue. And we went to the GP, which took 2 weeks to get into, as we talked about earlier. And I'm thinking about this as you're talking. And I remember the first thing they said was, well, we need to remove the possibilities of the worst case scenarios, which is things like multiple sclerosis and stuff like that, because it's quite a strange place above the spinal cord. And straight away your mind goes to the worst case scenarios, doesn't it? And then I remember it took about 2 months to get the MRI, the results.
So
then
sorry.
And then they ruled that out. So it was great news in terms and then they thought, well, what is it? And we said, well, we were asking you that.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, we're looking at the heart, and then we're looking at various autoimmune conditions. We've ruled those out over the next 6 months. And then, we got 1 year in, they still don't know the answer, and this is ongoing. And now we think it's most likely long COVID or something they don't really recognise. But the reason I'm saying that is because that waiting thing resonates with me. And I think the more powerful and potent that these diagnostics can become, the more benefit that they can get to the patient. But equally, from an economic perspective, it takes less weight off the healthcare system, right? So
And that is exactly right. And what people call, and I'm sorry to hear what you and your wife and your family
well,
are
we're
going
okay.
through.
We're lucky, right? So,
exactly.
So we think, we've ruled out the worst things, but I feel sorry for the people that didn't have that.
Yeah, and it's often called the diagnostic odyssey. And not only is it expensive and worrisome and stressful, frankly, a lot of people don't have the time. They can't take off time at work to go to doctor's appointments and otherwise. So it also is a very big societal burden on people to even have the chance to go through that process. So we need to make monitoring and diagnosis easier, faster, cheaper for everyone. And I believe, and all of the studies would say, if you can diagnose somebody serious or not serious faster, you will actually save money in the whole system.
Definitely. Yeah. It's about educating them on how to do that, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, educating people how to do it, educate physicians to accept the new kinds of tests, and ensure the tests are as accurate as possible.
Yeah. One more thing, Mara, as you're talking, typically I found that most diagnostics tests are in oncology or infectious diseases. I noticed that from your experience, you're actually exploring neurodegenerative diseases. I'd love to hear more about that.
You're right. So many of the more sophisticated personalized medicine diagnostics have been in oncology. But what are the areas that comes next? Your number one is neurodegenerative disease. And only 5 years ago, it was dead. We had no therapeutics for Alzheimer's or general dementia. We had very few options for Parkinson's disease. And that has all changed in the last 5 years. And with new drugs coming out, there's a renewed interest in diagnostics. And just in May 2025, the FDA approved a test to diagnose, the FDA approved a test to diagnose Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment early. Now, why is that important? The drugs that treat this are not ideal yet, but if we can diagnose more people early, they can make their own plans and decide how they want to go forward. And with more people being diagnosed early, it's easier to put them into clinical trials, better to test new drugs, and ultimately, I believe we will have better and better drugs for those diseases, but it starts with diagnosis. So Alzheimer's is the first one, Parkinson's disease is the next one, and I think other diseases that are related to this in some way, autoimmune diseases, and you've talked about MS and otherwise, it's a complicated diagnosis today that's very invasive. We will have, I believe, blood tests and potentially saliva and other fluid tests for these autoimmune diseases. The next area that I think is probably 5 years out is metabolic diseases, with the popularity of GLP-1 and the challenge with MASH. We're investing in one company that's looking at this, at Illumina Ventures. There'll be multiple different types of tests. One is early diagnosis. Second is risk stratification. And we will see these metabolic diseases to be able to be diagnosed earlier and earlier and hopefully avoid permanent damage in the body, even if we have a drug to treat people later.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you, Mara. And for the audience members, if they wanted to reach out to you directly to talk about investment, advice, opportunity, what would you suggest?
Couple of different ways. If it's regarding investments in genomics, diagnostics, life science tools, or therapeutics, Mara at illuminaventures.com, or look at illuminaventures.com and our website, and you can find out more and do your homework before you pitch. Secondly, at Arizona State University at mara.aspinall at asu.edu. But If you're interested in diagnostics and people want to see what is the most innovative technologies that are coming out, I publish a newsletter called Sensitive and Specific, the testing newsletter on Substack. It's free, comes out every Thursday. Take a look in Substack and find it there, Sensitive and Specific.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful to be here.